In the early 20th century, rubber became one of the most valuable resources in the industrial world. Automobiles, electrical insulation, military equipment, and global trade all depended on it. Control over rubber meant control over modern power. At the center of this demand stood Liberia. Liberia was not a European colony. It was an independent African republic founded in the 19th century. Yet by the 1920s, its economy was fragile, its government deeply indebted, and its political power concentrated in the hands of a small ruling elite. That vulnerability would soon reshape the country. In 1926, the American corporation Firestone Tire and Rubber Company signed an agreement with the government of Liberia. The terms were extraordinary. Firestone received a 99-year lease on approximately 1 million acres of land, one of the largest plantation concessions ever granted to a private company. The rent was minimal. In return, Liberia received a large loan that immediately placed the government in long-term debt. From that moment forward, Liberia's economy became tied almost entirely to rubber production. But land alone could not produce rubber. Labor was the real problem. Firestone needed tens of thousands of workers to tap rubber trees under harsh tropical conditions. Liberia did not have a large wage labor workforce. Instead of recruiting workers freely at competitive wages, the Liberian government intervened. State officials issued labor quotas to local chiefs. Chiefs were ordered to supply able-bodied men for plantation work. What followed was coercion. Men were compelled to leave their villages. Some were marched long distances to plantations. Families were separated. Workers were held under contracts they could not realistically refuse. Failure to meet rubber quotas brought punishment, beatings, imprisonment, or extended service. Though chains were not always used, international observers would later conclude that the system met the definition of forced labor. It is important to be precise. Firestone did not publicly administer whips or prisons. Instead, the company benefited from a system enforced by the Liberian state. This arrangement allowed corporate officials to claim legality, while coercion occurred one step removed from the plantation office. The result was a labor regime that resembled slavery in practice, if not in name. Liberian workers did not launch a nationwide uprising. Resistance took quieter forms. Men fled plantations whenever possible. Villages hid potential recruits during labor drives. Chiefs delayed or refused quotas, risking punishment. Exhausted workers slowed production, intentionally or unintentionally. These actions did not overthrow the system, but they disrupted it. Rubber yields suffered. Recruitment became harder. The contradictions of the labor system became increasingly visible. By 1929, reports of forced labor in Liberia reached Europe and the United States. The League of Nations launched a formal investigation. Its findings were damning. The investigation confirmed the existence of forced labor, the role of the Liberian government in enforcing it. Conditions comparable to slavery, the indirect benefit to foreign corporations, including Firestone. The scandal was no longer deniable. The political consequences were immediate. In 1930, Liberia's president, Charles D.B. King, resigned from office. Senior government officials were removed. Liberia faced international condemnation and the threat of foreign oversight. This was one of the rare moments in African history when labor abuses forced the resignation of a sitting head of state. But did rubber imperialism end? No. Firestone remained in Liberia. Forced labor declined under international pressure. Wages were introduced more formally. Contracts replaced open coercion. But exploitation continued. Rubber profits flowed outward. Liberia remained economically dependent. the plantation system survived. Cleaner, quieter, and still unequal. This story is often misunderstood. Liberian workers did not defeat the rubber empire by force. They exposed it. Their flight, refusal, and endurance made exploitation visible. International scrutiny cracked the system's legitimacy, even if it did not dismantle it. The lesson of Liberia's rubber era is not simply about the past. It reveals how exploitation can operate through contracts instead of chains, how corporations rely on states to enforce labor discipline, and how resistance does not always look like rebellion. It can look like refusal. Rubber built modern industry. But in Liberia, it also revealed how imperial power survives, by hiding in plain sight.